My name is Serafina, and for most of my 32 years, I've been defined by my family not by who I am, but by who I am not. I am not Clara, my older sister, the corporate shark with the six-figure salary and the corner office. I am not the daughter my parents brag about at their country club. I am the quiet one, the artistic one, the one with the little hobby. That hobby is my small batch organic food company, a business I poured my blood, sweat, and savings into. They called it cute. They called it a phase. They never called it a success. But that was about to change. My sister thought she was launching the biggest product of her career at a lavish gala. She never imagined she was actually launching mine. She would soon learn that the sweetest revenge isn't loud and angry, but served cold on a national stage with her own boss holding the spoon. Before I dive into how a simple jar of sauce blew up my entire family and changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you all are watching from today. Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever felt underestimated by the very people who should have been your biggest fans, go ahead and hit that like button, because I have a feeling you're going to understand this story on a spiritual level. And for all the new viewers, make sure you subscribe to join our community of storytellers and survivors. What would you do if you held a secret that could either save you or destroy the person you were always taught to look up to? Stick around because you're about to find out exactly what I did. It all really began, or perhaps just crystallized, at a Sunday dinner about a year before the world turned upside down. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were less about family bonding and more about a weekly performance review where I was consistently rated as fails to meet expectations. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, weren't cruel people. They were simply blinded by a very specific, narrow vision of success, a vision my sister Clara fulfilled to perfection. She arrived that evening in a cloud of expensive perfume and accomplishment, her briefcase clicking authoritatively against the flagstone floor of the entryway. She had just been promoted to senior vice president at Innovate Dynamics, a notoriously aggressive marketing firm, and the entire evening was unofficially dedicated to her triumph. I, on the other hand, had brought a peace offering, a new creation. It was a rustic fig and balsamic jam, simmered for 6 hours with fresh rosemary from my own meager herb garden. I had presented it in a beautiful little glass jar with a hand-tied ribbon and a label I'd designed myself, Serafina's Harvest. I placed it on the polished mahogany table like a supplicant at an altar. My mother picked it up, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the glass. "Oh, Serafina, this is lovely," she said, her voice carrying the same tone she used for a child's macaroni necklace. "Another one of your little projects." She didn't open it. She just placed it near the salt shaker, an ornamental afterthought. My father, ever the pragmatist, chimed in while carving the roast chicken. "That's nice, sweetheart. Did you make any money at that farmer's market last weekend? Enough to cover your costs." I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks. "I did well, Dad. I sold out of the spicy tomato chutney and nearly all the lemon curd." "That's wonderful," Clara said, her voice dripping with the kind of practiced sincerity that made my teeth ache. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes sparkling with something that looked like pity but felt like condescension. "It's so important to have a passion. A little hobby to keep you busy." A hobby. That word. It was the polished, socially acceptable nail they hammered into my coffin week after week. It didn't matter that I was up at 4 in the morning to drive to the wholesale market, that I spent hours meticulously sterilizing jars, that I studied agricultural reports to source the best organic produce, that I haggled with suppliers and balanced my own books and filed my own business taxes. To them, if it didn't come with a W-2 form and a dental plan, it was a hobby. It was something a bored housewife did between yoga and book club. "It's a business, Clara," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. She waved a dismissive hand, a glint of diamonds on her finger catching the light. "Of course it is. And I'm so proud of you for trying. Really. It takes guts to do your own thing even if it's, small scale." She then turned to our parents, effortlessly hijacking the conversation. "Anyway, speaking of big scale, the Sterling Automotive campaign is entering phase 3. We're projecting a 30% market share increase by the fourth quarter. The analytics are just staggering." For the next hour I listened. I listened to Clara talk about synergy and brand activation and stakeholder engagement. I watched my parents hang on her every word, their faces glowing with pride. My father asked her detailed questions about amortization schedules. My mother wanted to know if she'd be traveling to the European conference in Zurich. I sat there pushing a piece of chicken around my plate, feeling like I was fading into the floral wallpaper. The jam sat on the table untouched. Later, as I was helping my mother clear the dishes, she patted my arm. "Don't be discouraged, dear," she whispered, as if I were a teenager who'd just lost a student council election. "Your sister is just very driven. It's a different path. Maybe one day when you're ready to settle down, you can take a business course at the community college. It might help you turn that hobby of yours into something more viable." The comment was meant to be kind, I knew. But it was laced with the poison of their low expectations. They didn't see the passion. They didn't see the grit. They saw a little girl playing with mud pies, and they were gently, patiently waiting for her to grow up and get a real job. The most painful part was the silent, insidious way it made me doubt myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just playing. Maybe my dreams were as small and insignificant as they seemed to believe. As I packed up my untouched jar of jam, Clara walked past me on her way out, briefcase in hand. She paused and gave me a smirk. "Hey Sarah. Good luck with the e-jam business," she said, the slight pause before the word jam, turning it into an insult. "Just don't try to sell your stuff to a company like Global Provisions. They'd probably need a whole team of scientists to figure out what's in it." She laughed, a short, sharp sound, and then she was gone, leaving me alone in the hallway with the scent of her perfume and the bitter taste of her words. Global Provisions. The largest food conglomerate on the planet. The joke was meant to highlight the vast, unbridgeable chasm between her world and mine. I clutched the jar of jam so tightly in my hand I was surprised the glass didn't break. I didn't know it then, but she had just spoken our shared destiny into existence. That night I didn't sleep. I went home to my tiny apartment, the kitchen of which doubled as my production facility, and I didn't feel defeated. I felt a cold, hard knot of anger and determination forming in my stomach. A hobby was it? Fine. Let them think that. The sauce, the one that would change everything, wasn't born from a moment of inspiration. It was born from desperation and defiance. It was my silent, simmering answer to every condescending smile, every dismissive comment, every single time I was made to feel less than. My business, Serafina's Harvest, was bleeding money. Not a dramatic, gushing wound, but a slow, silent drain that was just as deadly. A crucial piece of equipment, a commercial-grade immersion blender I'd saved for a year to buy, had sputtered its last. A check from a small gourmet shop had bounced. My rent was due. The walls of my tiny operation felt like they were closing in, and the voices of my family echoed in my head. Asterisk, it's not viable. It's a hobby, asterisk. I refused to let them be right. I couldn't bear the thought of calling my father for a loan, of hearing the "I told you so" couched in concerned paternal tones. So I turned to the only thing I knew how to do. I created. I decided I needed one hero product. One standout item that would get people talking, something so undeniably delicious that it would force even the most skeptical boutique owners to give me shelf space. It had to be special. It had to be me in a jar. My quest started not in my kitchen, but in the sun-drenched fields of Mr. Henderson's farm about an hour outside the city. Arthur Henderson was a man who looked like he'd been grown from the soil himself. Weathered, kind, with hands as gnarled as the heirloom tomato vines he tended. He was in his late 70s and had been one of my first supporters, selling me his imperfect produce for a fraction of the price when I was first starting out. He saw the passion my family missed. He never called it a hobby, he called it good work. "The secret's in the soil, Serafina," he told me one morning, rubbing a clump of dark earth between his thumb and forefinger. "But the magic is in what you do with it." I spent weeks with him, learning about the nuances of his tomatoes, the smoky sweetness of the black crims, the low acidity of the San Marzanos, the bright tangy burst of the little sun golds. He became my mentor, the grandfatherly figure I'd always wished I had. He'd share stories of his late wife, Eleanor, the same name as my mother, a strange irony, and how she could make a feast from almost nothing. Her philosophy was his: don't mess with what the earth gives you. Just help it sing. Back in my kitchen, which was perpetually fragrant with garlic and vinegar, I began my work. This wasn't just cooking, it was alchemy. The base was a combination of roasted black crim and San Marzano tomatoes, creating a foundation that was both deeply savory and subtly sweet. I spent an entire weekend just perfecting the roasting process, experimenting with different temperatures and times until the skins were blistered just so and the sugars had perfectly caramelized. The air in my apartment was thick and heavy, a sacred incense of my own making. Then came the layers. I didn't want a simple tomato sauce. I wanted a story. I added a dash of smoked Spanish paprika for warmth and mystery, a whisper of the bonfires I imagined in faraway lands. A high-quality balsamic glaze, aged for 12 years, provided a complex, tangy backbone. A bit of heat came from chipotle peppers in adobo, not enough to scorch the palate, but a slow-building warmth that bloomed at the back of the throat. The real secret, though, was a blend of herbs steeped in olive oil, a trick I learned from one of Mr. Henderson's wife's old handwritten recipe cards. It was mostly common herbs, thyme, oregano, a hint of marjoram, but it was the addition of one unexpected ingredient, fennel seed, toasted and lightly crushed, that made it unique. It added an elusive aromatic note that kept you coming back trying to place it. For a month my life was a cycle of roasting, simmering, blending, and tasting. My counters were covered in little bowls of different variations. My fingers were permanently stained red. I tasted until my tongue was raw. I kept meticulous notes in a leather-bound journal. Batch 17. Too acidic. Needs more caramelization. Batch 24. Paprika is overpowering. Reduce by half a gram. Batch 31. Close. The fennel is coming through. The balance is almost there. Finally, one rainy Tuesday night I created batch 32. I dipped a spoon into the pot of deep velvety red sauce. I closed my eyes and tasted. It was all there. The immediate bright taste of the sun-ripened tomatoes, followed by the smoky depth, the sweet tang of the balsamic, the slow creeping heat, and finally that ethereal aromatic finish from the herbs. It was complex, comforting, and utterly unique. It was the best thing I had ever made. I actually wept, a single exhausted tear of relief and pride splashing onto the stained countertop. I had done it. I had helped the earth sing. But a song needs an audience. My small-scale operation was still teetering on the brink. I needed a miracle. And that's when I found it during a late-night doom scroll through food industry blogs. It was an article about a new kind of intellectual property firm called Artisan Alchemists. Their business model was revolutionary. They acted as a blind intermediary, connecting small, anonymous creators with major food corporations looking for authentic, innovative products. The idea was to strip away the biases of marketing departments and let the quality of a recipe speak for itself. Creators submitted their recipes and a story behind them under a pseudonym. If a corporation was interested, Artisan Alchemists and their legal team would handle the entire licensing deal, protecting the creator's identity with an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. It felt like a fantasy, a shot in the dark. But Clara's mocking voice echoed in my ears. Don't try to sell your stuff to a company like Global Provisions. A bitter, defiant thought took root in my mind. What if I did? What if I submitted my sauce? The anonymity appealed to me on a profound level. My creation could be judged on its own merit, free from the baggage of my name, free from the shadow of my family's low expectations. If it was rejected, no one would know. If it was accepted, well, I hadn't let myself dream that far. With trembling hands I navigated to their website. The submission form was simple. Recipe, pros, and a section titled The Story. I thought about what to write. I didn't want to invent some folksy nonsense. I wanted to tell the truth just without the names. I created a pseudonym, one that felt right, The Hearth Keeper. I wrote about a young woman learning from an old farmer, about his wife's handwritten notes, about the belief that food was a way to keep the warmth of a home, a hearth, alive. I poured all the passion and struggle and love that went into batch 32 into that one-page story. I attached the recipe, a document that felt as personal as a diary page, and I clicked submit. A small box popped up on the screen. Thank you. We will be in touch if your submission moves to the next stage. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had just sent my secret, my soul, out into the void. For weeks I heard nothing. The silence was deafening. I continued with my daily grind, selling at markets, trying to get my invoices paid, the hope I'd allowed myself to feel beginning to curdle into foolishness. My immersion blender remained broken. I started looking at job listings for office admin positions. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was time to give up the hobby. Then one Thursday afternoon my phone rang. It was an unknown number with a New York area code. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a spam call. But something made me answer. Hello. Am I speaking with the hearthkeeper? A man's voice asked. It was a calm, formal, elegant voice. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Yes. My name is Alistair Finch. I am the senior counsel for Artisan Alchemists. I'm calling about your submission. The one for a smoked tomato and herb sauce. I could barely form words. Okay. We have an interested party, he said, his tone maddeningly level. A very interested party. They believe the product has significant market potential. The party is Global Provisions. I dropped the crate of empty jars I was holding. They shattered on the concrete floor of my kitchen, the sound echoing in the sudden ringing silence of my own shock. Global Provisions. The company from Clara's joke. The Goliath to my David. It couldn't be real. Are you still there? Mr. Finch asked. Yes, I whispered, sinking onto a stool. Yes, I'm here. Good, he said. They want to move forward with an exclusive licensing agreement. The offer is substantial. Life-changing, in fact. However, their marketing strategy hinges on the anonymous artisan narrative you so eloquently provided. They want to build a mystique around the hearthkeeper. This means the non-disclosure agreement will be exceptionally strict. No one can know you are the creator. Not your friends, not your family. Not until the official product launch, at which point they plan to reveal your identity as a major part of the campaign. Do you understand and agree to these terms? I thought of my family. Of Clara's smug face. Of my mother's pitying looks. Of the untouched jar of jam. The idea of them not knowing of my success being entirely separate from their judgment was intoxicating. It was the purest form of validation I could imagine. Yes, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I understand. I agree. A few days later, a check arrived by courier. It was an advance against future royalties. It was for more money than I had ever seen in my life. I stared at the number, at the name, Artisan Alchemists on the check, and I laughed until I cried. I paid my rent. I bought a new top-of-the-line immersion blender. I repaired my struggling business. When my mother asked where the money came from, I told her a partial truth. I said I'd won a competitive small business grant for promising female entrepreneurs. Oh, that's wonderful, dear, she'd said over the phone. That's fantastic. A little pocket money to help you with your project. I'm so glad you're having fun with it. Pocket money. I looked at my bank statement at the number that had 6 zeros and I just smiled. The game had begun. The next few months were a masterclass in surrealism. I was living a bizarre double life. By day I was Serafina, the small-time purveyor of jams and chutneys. I'd stand for hours at my stall at the city's weekend farmers market, offering tiny spoonfuls of my lemon curd to tourists, haggling over a 50-cent price difference on a jar of pickled asparagus, feeling the familiar ache in my lower back. I'd deal with the condescending boutique owners who acted like they were doing me a favor by stocking 3 jars of my products on their bottom shelf. It was the same grind, the same struggle, the same quiet, often invisible work. But by night and in stolen moments during the day, I was the hearthkeeper, the secret architect of a multi-million-dollar product launch. My communication was exclusively through Alistair Finch, my stoic and discreet legal guardian angel. He would send me encrypted emails with subject lines like, "Update on Project A," or "Regarding H." These emails contained glimpses into a parallel universe where my sauce was a star. I saw mock-ups of the packaging, a gorgeous, heavy glass jar with a minimalist label. The brand name they'd chosen was Aura. It was sleek, sophisticated, and a world away from my rustic Serafina's Harvest labels. Alistair sent me links to password-protected videos of focus groups. I'd watch through my laptop screen, my heart in my throat, as a dozen strangers in a sterile room in Chicago or Los Angeles tasted my creation. I watched their faces change from polite interest to genuine delight. "Wow," a woman in a business suit would say. "That's complex. It's smoky but also sweet. What is that flavor? I could put this on anything," a man in a baseball cap would add. "Pasta chicken a shoe. I'd eat a shoe if it was covered in this." Their words were a balm on the 1,000 tiny cuts my family's dismissal had inflicted over the years. These people didn't know me. They had no reason to be kind or patronizing. They were just reacting to the sauce itself, to batch 32, and they loved it. It was the purest validation I had ever known. One afternoon I was driving my beat-up van back from the market, feeling particularly discouraged after a slow sales day when I saw it. It was a massive billboard overlooking the expressway. It was a picture of the Aura jar artfully lit with a single tantalizing tagline, "The taste you can't describe. The feeling you can't forget." And underneath in smaller letters, "The new flavor from Global Provisions. Coming soon." I had to pull over onto the shoulder of the road. I just stared at it, the cars whizzing past me. My sauce. My little recipe, born of desperation in my tiny kitchen, was now 10 feet tall, looking down over the entire city. It was the most triumphant and loneliest moment of my life. I had no one to share it with. That evening the phone rang. It was Clara. "Sarah, you are not going to believe the news." Her voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "I can finally tell you what I've been working on. It's been top secret for months." I took a deep breath. "What is it, Clara?" "My firm Innovate Dynamics, we've landed the biggest client in our history. The biggest campaign of my career. We are heading the national launch for a brand new gourmet sauce from, wait for it, Global Provisions." I leaned against my counter, a wave of dizziness washing over me. The irony was so thick, so potent, I felt like I could taste it. "Well, Clara, that's huge. Huge doesn't even cover it. We're talking a full-spectrum media blitz. This sauce, Sarah, it's revolutionary. The flavor profile is insane. Their development team is genius. It's called Aura. This is going to put me on the map. I'm talking a partnership at the firm. I'm talking a feature in Adweek. Their development team. Genius." I almost choked. "Anyway," she barreled on, "the official launch gala is in 3 weeks at the Crystal Hall downtown. It's black tie. Very exclusive. But of course I can get you a ticket. You have to come." The invitation wasn't an act of sisterly affection. I knew exactly what it was. It was a power move. It was Clara, the magnanimous success, offering a glimpse of her glittering world to her poor, struggling hobbyist sister. It was a chance for her to show me what real success looked like. "I don't know, Clara," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "A black tie gala isn't really my scene." "Oh, don't be silly," she insisted. "It'll be good for you. You need to get out of that stuffy little kitchen of yours. Network a little. See how the big leagues work. You can wear that one good black dress you have, the one for Mom and Dad's anniversary. It'll be fine. I'll even introduce you to some people. It's the least I can do." The condescension was a physical force, pressing down on me through the phone. But beneath the anger, a cold, clear plan was beginning to form. A plan that was both terrifying and thrilling. "Okay, Clara," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be there." In the weeks leading up to the gala, the pressure mounted. The Aura campaign was everywhere. On television, on the radio, on the sides of buses. Clara was unbearable. She would call me with breathless updates, completely oblivious. "The pre-orders are through the roof. The media buzz is incredible. My team is just killing it. My team, our strategy, my concept." She had so thoroughly absorbed the credit for the sauce's creation that the truth had ceased to exist in her mind. The worst part was my parents. They were flying in for the launch, completely swept up in Clara's success. "We're just bursting with pride," my mother told me over the phone. "To see our daughter on a stage like that, being celebrated for her hard work and talent. It's just wonderful to finally have a child who is a real success story." A child. Not one of our children. The implication was as sharp and clean as a shard of glass. I was the other one. The failed experiment. The hobbyist. The comment cut so deeply that for the first time my resolve wavered. The weight of the deception, of the impending collision, suddenly felt too heavy to bear. I was about to humiliate my sister, my arrogant, condescending, often cruel sister, but my sister nonetheless, in front of everyone she knew, in front of our parents. Was this victory worth the fallout? I paced my small apartment, my hands shaking. I picked up the phone and called Alistair Finch. "I can't do it," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush the moment he answered. "I have to tell her. This is wrong. It's going to destroy her." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint, distant sound of New York traffic. When Alistair finally spoke, his voice was not harsh, but it was firm. "Serafina, Do you remember the story you wrote in your submission? About the hearth keeper? Yes, I whispered. You wrote that food was about honoring the truth of an ingredient. It was about letting something real and authentic shine. That is what we are doing here. The product is real. Its quality is authentic. The launch is simply a celebration of that truth. He paused again. This moment does not belong to your sister. It does not belong to her marketing firm. It belongs to the person who spent countless nights perfecting a recipe. It belongs to the person who understood the difference between a black crim and a San Marzano tomato. It belongs to you. You are not doing this to her. You are simply stepping into the light that has been yours all along. Do not let her or anyone else make you feel guilty for your own success. His words were like a steel rod slipped into my spine. He was right. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of reclamation. I was simply claiming what was mine. Thank you, Alistair, I said, my voice clear again. I needed to hear that. I know, he said. Now go and pick out a dress. And Serafina? Make sure it's a new one. You can afford it. The night of the gala arrived, a swirl of cold November air and flashing city lights. The Crystal Hall was a palace of glass and steel, its soaring atrium dripping with chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. The air buzzed with money and power. Men in sharp tuxedos and women in glittering gowns drifted through the space, champagne flutes in hand. I walked in wearing a simple, elegant dark green velvet dress, a color that reminded me of Mr. Henderson's tomato vines. I had bought it the day after my call with Alistair. It was the most expensive piece of clothing I had ever owned, and it felt like armor. I immediately felt out of place, a field mouse at a lion's banquet. My parents found me first. My mother kissed the air beside my cheek, her eyes scanning the room over my shoulder. Serafina, you came. It's all so exciting, isn't it? My father shook my hand, his grip firm and brief. Your sister is over there talking to the CEO of Global Provisions. A real titan of industry. Incredible. Their attention was a tangible force, aimed entirely at the room's center of gravity, Clara. And then she appeared, descending upon us in a cloud of triumph. She was wearing a stark white power suit that made her look like a conquering general. Her smile was wide and brilliant, but it didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me. Sarah, you made it, she said, her voice a little too loud. Nice. Try not to look too overwhelmed by all this. Here, she thrust a glass of champagne into my hand. Have some of this. The canapés are divine, though of course not as rustic as your stuff. There was again the casual, cutting remark designed to put me in my place. But for the first time it didn't sting. It was like a stone skipping harmlessly off the surface of a deep, calm lake. I just smiled. A quiet, knowing smile that she completely misinterpreted as awe. It's an amazing event, Clara, I said truthfully. You should be proud. Oh, I am, she said, preening. This is the culmination of everything I've ever worked for. She was then swept away by a group of journalists. I watched her go, a magnetic force of ambition and ego. I found an empty chair at a small table near the back of the cavernous hall, partially obscured by a large potted palm. I was a ghost at my own feast, an invisible spectator waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. I took a slow sip of the champagne and settled in to watch the show. The program began with a polished video montage showcasing Innovate Dynamics' marketing prowess, all quick cuts and soaring orchestral music. A junior executive from Global Provisions gave a brief, forgettable speech. And then it was Clara's turn. She strode onto the brightly lit stage to a round of enthusiastic applause, which she accepted with a practiced, humble dip of her head. My parents were in the front row, their faces alight with an almost painful level of pride. My mother was clutching my father's arm, her eyes shining. Clara's speech was a masterpiece of corporate self-congratulation. She was radiant under the spotlights, a vision of modern success. Thank you, she began, her voice resonating with confidence. When Global Provisions first approached us with a mandate to launch a new product, we knew this couldn't be just another sauce on the shelf. We needed a paradigm shift. We needed to synergize authenticity with a robust, multi-platform market activation. The buzzwords flowed from her like a river. Disruption, innovation, ideation, consumer-centric strategy. She talked about the Aura brand as if she had personally conceived it in a moment of divine inspiration. She spoke of our team's tireless efforts in flavor profiling, and our deep dive into the semiotics of gourmet branding. She painted a picture of herself and her team at Innovate Dynamics as the sole architects of this triumph. Not once did she mention a recipe. Not once did she acknowledge an external creator. In her narrative, the sauce had simply materialized out of the sheer force of her marketing genius. I watched her not with anger but with a kind of clinical detachment. It was fascinating. She had told this story so many times to her clients, to her colleagues, to our parents, that she now believed it with every fiber of her being. She wasn't just taking the credit. She had absorbed it, metabolized it, made it a part of her own DNA. I glanced at my parents. My father was nodding along, his expression serious and impressed. My mother looked like she might weep with joy. This was their daughter. It's a success. Clara concluded with a flourish. Aura is more than a product. It's a statement. It's a testament to what can be achieved when bold vision meets flawless execution. It is, I am proud to say, the new gold standard. And this is only the beginning. The applause was deafening. She beamed, drinking it in. As she walked off the stage, she caught my eye in the back of the room and gave me a tiny, triumphant smirk. Taste it. This is how it's done. Next to the stage was Mr. Davies, the CEO of Global Provisions. He was an older man in his late 60s, with a kind face and a calm, authoritative presence that didn't require shouting. He shook Clara's hand warmly as he took the podium. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice a welcome anchor of sincerity after her slick presentation. Clara and her exceptional team at Innovate Dynamics have crafted a marketing campaign that is truly second to none. They have built a beautiful, powerful vessel for this product. Clara, standing by the side of the stage, practically glowed. "But," Mr. Davies said, and the single word cut through the lingering applause, causing a hush to fall over the hall. "A vessel, no matter how beautiful, is empty without something precious inside. The marketing is the vessel. The soul of Aura. The soul comes from somewhere else." I saw Clara's smile falter just for a second. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Aura was not conceived in a boardroom," Mr. Davies continued, his gaze sweeping over the audience. "It was not engineered in a corporate test kitchen. It was discovered. We found it through a unique partnership with a firm that connects us with grassroots creators. We licensed this recipe because it was authentic. It was real. Told a story. It was created by a single passionate artisan who, for reasons of privacy, we have only known by their chosen pseudonym, the Hearth Keeper." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. I could feel hundreds of heads turning slightly, people whispering to their neighbors. The Hearth Keeper? Clara's face had gone rigid, her brilliant smile now a frozen, painted-on mask. She looked at Mr. Davies as if seeing him for the first time. "We believe in honoring the source," Mr. Davies said, his voice firm. "We believe that true value lies in creation, not just in packaging. The story of the Hearth Keeper is the true story of Aura. And tonight, with their gracious permission, we want to finally pull back the curtain and thank the genius behind this incredible product." My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a steady, powerful beat. This was it. The house lights dimmed, plunging the hall into darkness. The only light came from the massive video screens on either side of the stage. For a moment they were black. Then an image faded in. It wasn't a slick corporate graphic. It was my kitchen. My small, slightly cluttered, beloved kitchen. The camera panned slowly across my spice rack, the mismatched jars filled with vibrant colors. It lingered on my worn wooden cutting board, the one with the deep knife scars. Then the footage cut to the fields of Mr. Henderson's farm, the sun low in the sky, casting a golden light on the tomato vines. Mr. Henderson himself appeared on screen, his weathered face crinkling into a smile. "She's got a gift," his voice, warm and familiar, filled the silent hall. "She doesn't just cook. She listens to what the food wants to be." The screen showed my hands, up close, plunging into a large bowl of roasted tomatoes, crushing them. It showed me at my stove, stirring the deep red sauce, my brow furrowed in concentration. My voice, taken from the story I'd submitted to artisan alchemists, began to speak over the images. My grandmother taught me that a kitchen is the heart of a home. The hearth. It's where you keep the warmth, where you feed the people you love. Every jar is a little piece of that warmth. And then the camera pulled back and there I was. My face without makeup, my hair tied back in a messy bun, a smudge of sauce on my cheek. I was smiling, a real, unforced smile of pure joy as I tasted a spoonful of my creation. On my simple apron, the logo I had designed myself was clearly visible. A simple sheaf of wheat and the words Serafina's Harvest. The final shot was a slow zoom onto my face and then the screen faded to black. Elegant, simple script appeared, Serafina. The true creator of aura. For a full 3 seconds, there was absolute stunned silence in the crystal hall. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. A collective held breath. Then a single person began to clap. Then another. And suddenly the room erupted in thunderous applause, a wave of sound that was so much bigger and more genuine than the applause for Clara. A spotlight operator, clearly given prior instructions, swept the room and found me at my table in the back. The bright white circle landed on me, and I felt 1,000 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. I looked towards the front row. My father's jaw was literally hanging open. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth, her face a canvas of utter, stupefied shock. But my gaze was drawn to the side of the stage. To Clara. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving her a ghastly pale white that contrasted starkly with her power suit. Her perfect, confident posture had crumbled. She looked small, fragile, and utterly broken. Her eyes locked with mine across the vast, crowded room, and in them I saw a maelstrom of emotions. Disbelief, fury, betrayal, and something else, something I had never seen in my sister's eyes before. Humiliation. Mr. Davies was smiling from the stage. "Please, Serafina," he called out, his voice booming through the speakers. "Stand up. Take a bow. You've earned it." Slowly, my legs feeling strangely steady, I pushed back my chair and stood up. As I did, a single tear, one I hadn't even realized was forming, escaped and traced a hot path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or anger. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated and long overdue vindication. The applause washed over me, a cleansing wave. In the sea of clapping hands and upturned faces, I was no longer the hobbyist, the disappointment, the footnote in my family's story. I was the hearthkeeper. I was the creator. And everyone finally knew it. In the chaotic aftermath of the reveal, as the formal event dissolved into a buzzing hive of gossip and congratulations, I remained at my table, a small island of calm in a swirling sea. People I didn't know came up to shake my hand, to tell me how much they loved the story, to ask about my company. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. But I was waiting. I knew it was coming. And then they were there. Clara, flanked by my pale, shell-shocked parents, marched towards my table. Her face was a thundercloud, her eyes spitting fire. The stunned fragility I'd seen on stage had hardened into pure, unadulterated rage. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous so the nearby schmoozers couldn't hear. "How could you do this to me? You sat there, you let me make that speech. You made me look like a complete and utter fool." I looked up at her, at the sister who had spent a lifetime making me feel small, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a strange, sad pity. The calm that had settled over me was a shield. "No, Clara," I said, my voice even and quiet. "You did this. You were so convinced I was nothing, so busy looking down on my hobby, that you never once bothered to actually look at what I was doing. You never asked. You never cared. You heard about a genius artisan and it never even occurred to you that it could be me. That says everything, doesn't it?" My mother stepped forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Sarah, honey, we had no idea. It's wonderful. We're so proud of you." The words, the very words I had craved hearing my entire life, now sounded hollow, a desperate attempt to rewrite history. They were words of shock, not of faith. "You're proud now?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. There was no anger in it, only a profound, heartbreaking clarity. "You're proud because his name is on the bottle and because all these people are applauding? You weren't proud last week. You weren't proud when I was driving a beat-up van and working 18-hour days for a few $100s at the market. Your pride is a reaction. It's not a belief. I appreciate the sentiment, Mom, but I don't need it anymore." My father, for his part, was speechless. He just stared at me, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the woman standing before him. Clara just shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "So this was all some pathetic, elaborate revenge plot? Because I was more successful than you?" "This was never about you," I said, and I meant it. "This was about me. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. The fact that you got caught in the crossfire is a consequence of your own blindness, not my malice. I stood up, my purse in my hand. I was done. I had nothing left to say to them, nothing left to prove. I have to go. I turned and began to walk away, leaving the three of them standing there, frozen in a silent tableau of their own shattered assumptions. Just as I reached the edge of the crowd, a kind hand touched my elbow. It was Mr. Davies. "Serafina," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That was quite a show." "It wasn't my intention to cause a scene," I said honestly. "Sometimes a scene is necessary to clear the air," he replied with a wise smile. "Your creation is magnificent. Truly. I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you and for Serafina's harvest. My team will be in touch tomorrow. We need to talk about expanding the line." He shook my hand, a gesture of genuine respect from a man who didn't have to offer it. It felt more real and more validating than any praise my family could ever muster. I thanked him and continued my walk, pushing through the grand glass doors and out into the crisp, cold night air. The city lights seemed brighter, the air cleaner. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, and felt a decade of quiet resentment and self-doubt rush out of me. I felt light. My phone buzzed in my purse. I knew who it would be. I answered on the first ring. "Well." Alistair Finch's calm voice came through the line. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that started deep in my chest. It was everything